But you need to know that before there was a star in the Christmas sky, you need to know that before the angels ever uttered a song, that before the shepherds offered any praise, and certainly before any wise sages came to kneel and to worship, that in the Christmas story, the first thing that happened was a dictator who was trying to secure his kingdom. And so the Christmas story in Luke 2 begins this way. In those days, a decree went out from the Emperor Augustus that the whole world should be registered, that this was the first registration, and it was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And all went to their own towns to be registered, and Joseph also went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to the city of Bethlehem, because he was descended from the house and the lineage of David, that he went there to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged and who was expecting a child. And while they were there, the time came for Mary to deliver her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and she laid him in a manger, for there was no place for them in the inn. Earlier this summer, because our oldest daughter had graduated from high school, we went on a special family vacation. We let our oldest daughter choose, and I think it was the pasta and the pizza, more so than the history, but she wanted to go to Italy. And so, having never been to Rome before, we flew to Rome as a family, and of course we hit the major sites, like getting to the Colosseum, and I'm kind of a history nerd and was so excited to get to see all of the different archaeology and the ancient history. And did you know that just like a 5-minute walk up an incline called Palatine Hill, it's literally like 5 minutes from the Colosseum, there's a huge palace. And this palace is magnificent. It's been reconstructed from the ruins of the actual stones of what was there before. And on the inside of this palace, there are beautiful artistic renderings of these amazing frescoes. Some of them are beautiful, and some of them are a little frightening, like this one here, a little creepy. And even in the grounds of what is this magnificent palace, even on the inside, even if you never left it, you could just tell what a majestic and amazing house that this would be to live in. And so we're touring and we're discovering and we're exploring and we're checking out all of this house. And it hadn't really dawned on me, that we're most of the way through the tour. And I turned to our tour guide, Barbara, and I said, Barbara, remind me, whose house is this again? I don't know that you ever told us. And she said, oh yes, this is Emperor Augustus's house. And I stopped in my tracks. Because this is where the Christmas story begins. From a house in Rome, in those days, a decree went out from the Emperor Augustus that the whole world should be registered. That imagine from that home that this man had so much power, so much authority because of the roads that they built, the concrete that they were able to use for the first time in technological history to rebuild walls that once they conquered it, they could fortify that city, and they secured what was known as the Roman Empire, and Augustus was the first of those emperors. And that he was so mighty that he could give a word. In fact, it says in those days a decree. The Greek word for that is a dogma. In those days, he gave a dogma that the whole world should be registered, that a working class couple all the way down in the Middle East, over 2,000 miles away, 500 plus hours of walking with 2 boat rides, had to go from the small town of Nazareth to the small town of Bethlehem just to make sure that they paid their taxes. Now, you didn't come tonight because you wanted to hear about my travels this summer with the little humble brag. And you didn't come tonight because you wanted to geek out on the history and the archaeology of what is in Rome. But what you need to know tonight, and the reason that I bring this up, is that this is the first and the last, the only time that the Bible ever mentions the name Caesar Augustus. That here is one of the most powerful people in all of history. Here is an individual who started something that lasted for 500 years before its collapse. Here became the cradle of what was known as peace and a certain form of a civilization. And yet what you need to know is that in God's history, he is just a footnote, a by the way, a passing reference. And that the reason that that is important for us on a Christmas like this is that you and I are faced with all kinds of different empires and all kinds of different kingdoms that we are confronted with. And whether it's on social media or whether it's in the news or whether it's in geopolitics or whether it's in our local politics, that there are all kinds of people who are trying to assemble all of their different empires. And you need to know that if they're not of God, that they are a mere footnote in history. A by the way, a passing reference. And that there is a kingdom that is not of this world, but it is certainly for this world. And what happened and what started in that manger in Bethlehem to come and worship, to worship Christ, a newborn king, that there is a new reality, that there is something that there is even greater than all of the mightiest empires of the world. So tonight, the question I want us to ponder for just a few moments is, how did Christmas conquer the empire? Cue the Star Wars music. How did Christmas conquer the empire? And this happened in a variety of ways, but the first way that it happened is that it conquered the empire with a hope that is greater than fear. For you see, the empires of this world want you to live in fear. They want you to be timid. They want you to hold back. They want you and I to stay in our place. And yet what you need to know is the movement of what happened in Bethlehem a long time ago was about instilling a hope, a light, even in the darkest and the bleakest of situations. And that it is a movement that continues to ripple throughout all of time and civilization and history today. It is even a movement that you and I are a part of. Our greatest investment and commitment in mission in the last 15 years abroad has been in one of the poorest countries of the world, in Malawi. And there is a small village in a remote section of Malawi. It's called Talire. And in that village, they have tried 6 different times to be able to drill a well in order to get water. And that we at Peachtree partnered with them for the 7th effort. Would you like to see what happened when they drilled for 6.5 hours and their response? See, the kids do. You guys should too. Let's watch the screens. For a long time, you and I and others of this congregation have sponsored children to remind them that God sees them, that God knows that they're here, and that we continue in the long line of instilling hope and encouragement in a bleak world that wants to live under the empire of fear, but we will not do it because of Christ. And so Christmas conquered the empire with a hope that was greater than fear. It also conquered the empire with a love that is greater than power. A love that's greater than power. It was just a few years ago when I was in a hospital that's right down the road from where we are in this sanctuary. And there was a family that was holding vigil and waiting for a beloved member of that family to die. This is a very well-connected family, and they had the attending physician and the nurses and all the people who were doing everything they could, but there came the precipice of that moment when nothing else could be done. They also had a friend who was another good physician, and she was there, and yet when she saw that this moment was drawing to a nigh, in the holiness of that moment, she removed her white lab coat that she was wearing. And she laid it over the edge of a chair so that she could walk and she could stand with this family not as a professional, not as one who was in charge, not as one who was in control, not as a scientist, but as a beloved friend. This is what happens at Christmas. That the King of all removed the garments of his royalty to be able to draw near to you and me, and that in life and death, he will make sure that his love is a love that's greater than any earthly force or power. And so Christmas conquered the empire with a hope that was greater than fear, with a love that is greater than power, and a joy that is greater than entitlement. For you see, we live in a world today that is being crushed by the empire of saying that everything has to be oriented around you, and that with the invention of technology like our so-called smartphones that keep making us dumber, is that each of these different things makes us think that everything has to be oriented around the way we think and the way we want, and we enter into the giant echo chamber of our own hearts and desires. But you need to know that there's another way to live, a bigger way to live, a real way to live. And that is living on our knees out of gratitude for what God has done for us. And if you don't believe me, that just watch this short little video of seeing gratitude and joy in action. Let's look at the screens.
Orar, Teddy. Lula, vamos a orar. Amado Señor, te damos gracias por los alimentos que nos vamos a servir. Bendice las manos que los proveyeron. En el nombre poderoso de Jesús. Amén.
First of all, some of you, like me, are thinking, I have failed as a dog owner. But isn't there a better way to live, right? Not out of entitlement, thinking that everything originates with us, but out of a humble gratitude, and that is where joy is found. And so Christmas conquered the empire with a hope that is greater than fear, with a love that is greater than power, with a joy that's greater than entitlement, and finally with a peace that is greater than hatred. I don't know if you recall, but this is the 10th anniversary of the tragedy of what took place at Sandy Hook Elementary School. And I don't know if you saw the story of what was in the New York Times of a teacher by the name of Mrs. Wexler, that when the violence and the chaos was breaking out around her, she drew her students close to her. What would she do in that moment in trying to comfort them, to encourage them? She sang, "Silent night, all is calm, all is bright." Over and over again, she took the words of that famous Christmas carol, and she sang it, and she whispered it, and she poured it into their hearts. Silent night, holy night, wondrous star, lend thy light. With the angels let us sing hallelujah to our what? To our King. In other words, the one that was born in Bethlehem a long time ago is the one who is our King. And so I need to rescue for you tonight that Silent Night, Holy Night is a revolution song. It is a song of resistance against the powers of this world, that Jesus enters into our world gently, quietly, silently, in order to usher in a different kind of kingdom that is very different from the empires of this world. And hopefully, when you saw maybe some of these things, that you recognize that these words are familiar to you: hope and love and joy and peace, and hope and love and joy and peace, and that these are familiar to you because these are the traditional 4 different candles of what happens at the Advent wreath. That week by week, starting 500 years ago, back in the 16th century, we lit the candles of hope and love and joy and peace and hope and love and joy and peace, to mark time and to march in step, because we are living a part of a different kinds of kingdom, my friends. Did you know that a Lutheran pastor started the first Advent wreath because he was tired of children asking him, "Is it Christmas yet? Is it Christmas yet? Is it Christmas yet?" And the reality is, even though we might feel that we're a little more sophisticated, are we really any different? In the midst of the dark empires of this world, God, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And that what we do in the passage of time and the marking of our lives is hope and love and joy and peace, and hope and love and joy and peace become the way that we gather our lives around the person and the work of Jesus Christ, the light of the world who came into the world so silently, that the wondrous gift is given. And so we join a global movement of saying that the empires of this world will not last, that the light of Christ has not gone out, and that things like fear and power and entitlement and hatred will not have the last word, that those kingdoms will come and those kingdoms will go, and that the kingdom of Christ will reign forever and ever. And so, as an act of revolution, marching because of the one who was born in Bethlehem, that though Emperor Augustus may have thought that he was starting something, but that Jesus will finish something. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was formless and empty, and darkness covered the face of the deep. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and God saw that the light was good. That the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light, and those living in a land of deep darkness, on them a light has dawned. That the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? That the Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? That in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That he was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing has made. And what has come into being through him was life, and that life was the light of all people, the light that shines in the darkness, and that the darkness cannot extinguish it. And that Jesus said, "I am the light of the world, that those who follow me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." And that Jesus said that that we are the light of the world, that a town built on a hill can never be hidden, that people do not light a lamp and then put it under a basket, but on a stand, so that it gives light to all in the house. So that in the same way you may now let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good deeds and give glory to your Father in heaven. And then in the final book of the Bible, in the book of Revelation, it says this, "And they need no night, for they will need no light of lamp or sun, for the Lord their God will be their light, and they will reign forever and ever." Make no mistake, as we pass the light of Christ, we are orienting our lives and joining forces with those who were a part of the silent revolution of hope and love and joy and peace, and hope and love and joy and peace, because his kingdom will never end. And so let us share the light of Christ on this, the holiest of nights.